Okay, so for those of you just tuning into the recording right now, basically we just went over all the setup tasks that you need to do. Just install all this software. We're gonna give it until 6:15 for you guys to all get your environment set up. Just make sure you raise your hand if you need any help. Okay, so go. Is it outside? Yo, if you guys are done setting up your stuff, food is gonna be outside, so you can go grab that right now. Yeah. First door over there. Be nice to our peeps. If you guys need help setting up the tech, yo, you got me one. I think. Oh, he's coming on the side. Okay, cool. Press up. Yeah. Just Control C out of it.
Is it Control C or Command C?
On Mac, it's Control C.
Oh, really? What's it? Okay, what's that?
I mean, sometimes it's like
Because I tried Command C, but it didn't work. So I did because I felt like the control was the command for Mac.
Or like for Mac, like if it's like a OS shortcut, then you use commands. But if it's like in the terminal, then it copies from like basically. I don't know. It's kind of annoying sometimes how inconsistent it is.
Oh, see, I did.
Tyler, do you know anyone? I just know I feel Oh, I don't think you have Git installed. Anyone need help? Raise your hand real quick. I'll come over. Anyone need help? Raise your hand. Does anyone still need time for this? Did you do the same thing? You try to go aesthetics now. It's gonna control. What was that? What was the check out. Okay, when you support it, go to your yes, yeah. Okay. Oh, wait. Did you yeah, we can go to that's We need to do this one. Unfortunately, then you just this posture. Um, that's just go. Sorry. Always. And just do it. It's just a check. We're gonna kind of work together. Sarah, what are you? Come here. So it was a little more complicated. I've been doing this oh, no, sorry, this is 25. So go off the slides. Yes. And then you're gonna it's all good. The workshop was a new. So, that's a CDM. Yeah. Is it? Uh, it, Yeah. And then check the slides. It's like it'll show you what's done. I'm checking the let's take a look. Yeah. Yeah. Have you? Yeah. Sorry, y'all. I forgot a step. Make sure you type cd clients before you go into npm install. So you're gonna do cd client like this. Yeah. Is this supposed to crash? Yeah. Okay. Is he on the workshop lunch crash? Yeah, he is. Any help?
Uh, yeah. Yeah. It's just one. So you have to
It's supposed to be blank, basically. Or like, there's gonna be like console errors. I think it might come out. I was. Yeah. 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 It'll error in the consoles, but it launches. Yeah. Okay. I think I worded that a little confusing. And what's up? Okay. So it's like it's like all the libraries. So sorry, and you have to look at sorry, it's number 11 right there. Guys, the step by step should be all on the slide. So I think most important is you make sure you uncheck this when you're forking it. Just copy step by step what's on the slides, And another thing is that if it says you don't have Node.js and npm, you might need to restart your VS Code. Where's Nathan? See here.
So we're gonna get started pretty like we're just keep on going with what we have to say. But if you guys have any questions, we'll still be going around to help. We'll still help you. Don't worry. We'll just get going on so that we can like get through this. We're running a little. It's taking a little bit of time.
Okay, so a quick introduction. What is Git, this thing that you just installed onto your computer? It is what we call a distributed version control system. This basically means that every single developer has a copy of the code on their machine. And this is how developers track changes in the code, collaborate, and maintain different versions of a project efficiently. And trust me, it's a lot better than sending back and forth files between each other. So, some essential Git terminology that you should know. A repo or a repository is the container that holds all of the project files and all of the history of the changes that have been made to them. The working directory is your local copy on your machine of the files that you modify. The staging area is a snapshot of changes waiting to be committed. So basically, once you've made the change on your local machine, then you want to send it out to other people. So you put it in the staging area first to get it ready to be sent out. And a commit is when you take your stage changes and you bundle them together into what's called a commit, and it finalizes the staging area, so to speak. And then finally, a branch is a parallel line of development, which is just a sequence of commits where you can have like two parallel universes of the code, just in case you're both working on something at the same time and you don't want to step on each other's toes. And then at some point in the future, you can merge those branches back together. And then the remote is a hosted version of your repo, just online somewhere, for example, on GitHub, so that whenever you push your changes to the remote, it's in the cloud and people can download it onto their machine. So the basic Git workflow is when you type code in your code editor, it changes the working directory. Once you've made the changes, you use git add to put it all in the staging area. And at this point, it's not quite finalized yet, so you can still add and remove stuff from the staging area. Once you're satisfied with all the changes you've staged, then you can bundle these changes together into a commit with the following command, git commit -m, and then in quotation marks is the message assigned to the commit. And then at that point, if you do git push, then it'll upload those commits to the cloud where other people can pull them. So this is just a quick diagram explaining the Git workflow. So as you can see, your working directory is your VS Code, and then you push the staging area, and then once you're done staging, when it turns into a commit, it goes into your local repository. And then when you push, it goes up to the cloud, which in our case is GitHub. And then when you pull, say your friend is also working on the code, if they've pushed commits to GitHub, when you type git pull, you take all of their changes and you put it on your machine. So a quick explanation of why do we have branches? Because a primary issue that a lot of developers face, especially before version control systems, is if two people were working on the same thing at the same time, you might make changes that breaks the other person's stuff. So the idea is that you work on it independently, and then whenever both of you are done with everything you want to do, then you can merge everything back together. And next, we're going to be moving on to what JSX is, which is an extension of JavaScript. But first, a quick go over of what async code is, which is what we failed to get to last workshop. So basically, asynchronous code, the idea is that you don't want the user to be constantly waiting for stuff to finish loading. So for example, have you ever opened social media and all the posts were blank, but all of the styling and all the boxes are still there? That's an example of asynchronous code. The page is still loading in data from the server, but at least on your end, all of the visual elements are already there. So that's the purpose of asynchronous code. And so then catch is the primary method through which we write asynchronous code. And using what's called a promise is basically where you have a piece of, you have a function that you're waiting to return from. And so then once that promise has finished loading all of its data and it's returned to you, then you can use .then so that when the promise completes, you handle the results that it's given you. And then if there's any errors, you use .catch. And then The problem with .then and .catch is that it can be a little bit unreadable. You end up having like a long string of .then handle this, .then send it here. So you don't really want to do that. It's kind of bad for readability. So what this is the most important thing you should know about JavaScript, especially working on UIs, is async, await, which are two keywords that you can put async in front of a function that makes it asynchronous. That's how we write the asynchronous code. And then when you use await, that means that you will only run this line of code when the asynchronous function that it's calling is finished. So basically, let's say I have an asynchronous function called getData. Then I will type await getData. That way, only when the data is finished being returned to me do I process that data. And in the meantime, I can do other stuff as well. And it's functionally identical to using then and catch, but it's much more legible. And so finally, we move on to JSX. JSX is not HTML, even though they look very similar. HTML is primarily for defining site structure, but the problem with HTML is you can't put logic into it. So for example, if you wanted like a counter for your site, or if you wanted to perform some code, then you couldn't put that into HTML itself. While on the other hand, JSX can embed logic into HTML. So it combines the structure of HTML with the logic of JavaScript. And so the primary use of JSX is for creating components, where JSX enables you to reuse your code and have more modularity, which is where you use code in different places without rewriting it all the time. And so just as a quick analogy, you can think of HTML as sort of the blueprints of your website structure and JavaScript as the brain of the structure. So that's why it's all the electrical wiring there. JSX, on the other hand, let me move this. JSX you can think of as a 3D printer. So it creates reusability in the code where you can pump out components and slap them onto the website without retyping the same thing over and over. And you can embed logic in it as well. So that's why it's just a 3D printer. And so here's some example of JSX syntax. So as you can see, in normal React without JSX, you would have to do React.create element pi, and then I do not use JSX. But the problem is that that doesn't really mirror HTML structure very well. So as you can see on JSX, which is the one on top, you can actually use the h1 tag that you would normally use in HTML within your JavaScript code. So it helps them mesh together a little bit better. And another thing about JSX is, like I mentioned before, you can embed logic into your HTML now. And you do this by using braces. So for example, if you had a const variable named name, which is assigned to the string ACNPack, then you could put it inside the HTML right there in between the p tags, so that when you put name in between those braces, when it actually renders on your website, it'll figure out what is stored as a value in the variable name, and it'll render it inside the website, and it'll evaluate everything for you. While if you're using normal just HTML and JavaScript with no JSX, you would have to actually go in and edit it with JavaScript without it automatically rendering. So in JSX, you can actually have a lot of different options for how you put expressions into the braces. So you could even do like arithmetic functions like multiplication here, and it'll automatically calculate the tax for you. You could do like conditionals, or you could do other stuff like that. And so here's another example of JSX syntax. Another thing that JSX enables is importing modules. So if you've ever worked with CSS before, or if you worked with CSS in the last workshop, you'd know that a big problem with CSS is that once you name a class or once you give an ID to something, you can't reuse it in the rest of the code, or else it'll cause like a conflict where things start to overwrite each other. So JSX enables you to use CSS as modules. That way, everything will be scoped specifically to that module, and you can reuse the same name without everything without stepping on each other's feet, basically. And then another important note is that in normal HTML, you could do like class equals food dash cravings. But in JSX specifically, you have to use class name because class is used for something different in JavaScript.
So before we move on to React, take like 5 minutes to just like kind of chill out because it's a lot of information at once. You guys do whatever you need. We're doing pretty good all the time because after this we're gonna go through the React and then we got a couple of activities to do. So for now, let's just take like a couple of minutes and vibe.
Yeah, and if you guys need any help or if you have questions about the content, feel free to raise your hands and we'll come over there. So I think
No, you're good. You're good. Thinking.
I think I was like kind
No,
of
because
worried about the time, but
no, that's a good
I
thing.
just realized that that might have been a little too much.
No, yeah, you're good. I just that way from here.
Yeah, I think that's good.
It was good.
Yeah. After that.
Yeah, so that's like a normal system. And every time one it just looks better, right? Every time one is different out of the start, so if you're looking at your website, it'll be like 50,000. The reason is from sports, little, you have like style. This is the end of every file. It has no CSS file, right? And you can make it very now. And so instead of having to create like a few buttons, if you put the button styles, actually you can just have many files. It's kind of, I don't think that's a good way. We're importing that CSS file, and from there, you can have any theory. There's like unique variable names. Based on that sounds right. Instead of having like 10,000, like one in like one for like one set. Yeah, exactly. Like for example, say you were working on two different pages, like login page and settings page, right? So most of them like in your CSS, but probably you guys start with button and stop like button settings, right? Probably just settings. So instead of having to figure out a bunch of different, you just have styling per another page of your website, and so you can just use that. So for me, for this, it's kind of like library. Yeah. So it's almost each like files like that. Yep. So this one doesn't actually do much, but you're right. When we have our CSS file, nice whatever call it, and so we're importing that. So, all right. So whenever go to that file and then figure out what's starting from, and figure what. Is that like what you need to do? Yeah. Yeah. Then after. Then it'll. Alright, I think we can get started.
Yeah, I'm not sure how long it's going to go.
It's alright. When you guys are ready, we're gonna start moving on to React, which is like our front end stuff. Fun. So React is basically going to be your JS framework for building any front end user interfaces. So the big thing that we like about React is that we can create components and nest those. So instead of having to, like Tyler said, instead of having to rewrite your code a bunch of times, you can create components. So it's going to be like a button, a text box, an input box, like whatever. You're going to be able to create those, and you're going to be able to nest those. So for example, if you're making like a social media and you have a bunch of tweets, you can put all those in a tweet group. So that's something that's going to make designing a web page a lot easier. So for us, it's going to make our job a lot easier. When you create, we can create a function that returns a React component, and then from there, we can just nest those in multiple, like as multiple components. So for example, here we have our function that just returns, this is a tweet. And then later in our code, if we want to just put a bunch of those together, we can just make a container and nest those components. The good thing that comes is that each component can have its own state. So it can be a prop, which is just a read-only argument. So when you create your React component, you're going to pass in a couple of values, whatever you define those values to be, but you can pass in a couple of values, and that component is going to have that value to it. So that's why you're going to be able to have one piece of code and have a bunch of different. It's all about reusability. And then hooks is going to be if we want to change that value. So what we can define is we can define a value and a setter function. And what happens is when we call that setter function, we're going to be able to change that value inside the component. So say we want to create a counter, and every time we click the button, it increases by 1. What happens is on click, whenever we click that button, we're going to call that setter function to go and say count +1, and that's going to automatically update itself. And the good thing is that whenever we use these hooks, instead of having to re-render the entire page from scratch, we only have to React does this automatically, and it re-renders that component only. So it's going to be a little bit faster. Oh yeah, callbacks functions. These are just some functions that you can pass in as arguments to other functions. So this is going to be like, we can show this on the next example, which is from here, right here, when we call this increment function. So this code's pretty important because it kind of has everything. It has some good React foundations. That red box right here, this is going to be our hook. So we're going to have our value count and then set count. So set count is our setter function, value is count, and we're just initializing it to be 0. And from here, when we create our button, every time we have on click, we're going to increment. And increment is those callback functions that we were talking about, which is just going to be set count, count +1. So inside this function, we're just updating count to be count +1. And what this button does, for example, is every time you click it, it's just going to up the number by 1. So however many times you click it, it's going to go up 1. So it's pretty simple, but it's pretty powerful because here also we don't have to put any logic for re-rendering the page, right? If you weren't using React, you would have to have some sort of logic. So every time there's an update on the page, you're gonna have to refresh everything. For here, React takes care of that by itself. Let's move on to some activities. So for our first activities, for these activities, don't worry if you can't get if like it's confusing or if you want to experiment. We talked about branching a little bit, and the reason we wanted you guys to uncheck that box when we fork the repo is because we have all of our different workshops are on different branches. So at the start of each workshop, if you guys come to Hack School 2, 3, and 4, we're just gonna switch to that next branch. So if you guys completely mess up this branch, it doesn't matter. You guys start clean slate next time. So you guys have fun. Try out some things because you can make some cool stuff. It's pretty powerful. But for this one, we're just going to be creating the preview card for the polls. We're just going to be creating this. You guys can go to client, source, and components, and then there's going to be this file called poll preview. This is going to be in your VS Code. And yeah, we're just going to do title. You guys can follow down the instructions. There's going to be comments inside poll preview, so you guys can just follow those out, and we'll give y'all a little bit of time, and then we can show some hints. You guys feel free to talk with your partner, like with your group.
Give them like how many time? We're just chilling. We'll give like 10 minutes. Yeah, sure. And like maybe it's after 7 minutes. Yeah. What was that? That was good. Put myself down. It was pretty chaotic. Yeah.
Yeah, let us know if you guys want help. That's good.
So,
You know, actually, it's a good point. That's a good point. I'm gonna say. By the way, guys, you don't actually need to CD into client SRC components. You don't need to change your directory. You guys can just stay in client because that's where you're gonna run your code from. Just navigate using like the VS Code. You guys can just navigate to those files, to that file. And this full preview file is just under SRC components. So you don't actually need to do anything with the terminal. So cd.com. Perfect. Yeah. SRC components. Yeah. You don't need when you put it in a curly bracket, it means you're creating an object. So for this one, you don't actually each individual. Yeah, I don't matter to you. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. You just want to have instead of having each one, you want to so when you put something in brackets, they change the object. So instead of saying having asking four different objects, you can just put entry in brackets and saying, all right, so I'm asking one object that has these four values. So you can instead of having having so like that.
After you finish post preview,
Okay.
like it should start because I put like I put like sample data in there, so it should just show this basically.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Someone having a
No, I was just wondering. Okay, we're ready.
Sorry. this inside the person all that. So like yeah, or yeah, literally there's no technical those like the stuff you're gonna add so so and if you go through uh, all right, at this stage, you guys can take a glimpse at the hints. So if you need help with anything, just make sure you raise your hand. We'll come help you. And also, you can use this boilerplate as a base for whatever you're doing. So this is our point, right? If you want to do that, we actually grab the issues of there as the export is and then that's how yeah. Yeah. In that way, like if you want to use it on the other side, all basically means that you don't need to specify the important attributes or if you have like multiple exports from the same file, then it was like you have to specify you can actually put passing. I work you open on that. Any then zero oh, it'll pull it probably. That's another of course. I'll move to answer questions.
Yeah. I get it.
Should I just do it, or should I ask for any more time?
Yeah. Do you guys need any more time? Raise your hand if you think you need more time, because we're thinking of moving on to the answer key. A little bit more time?
Yeah.
I got you.
We'll do like 2 minutes. All right, we're going to be wrapping up this activity soon, so if you need any more help, make sure you raise your hands. Yeah. So, if you're ever here, yeah. This. Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We're gonna show up the answer key. If as you guys are doing this, and if you guys keep the website open, so if you have npm run dev and it's still running, if you do control S and save, then it's just gonna update your changes live. If you have autosave on there, it's literally just gonna update it like live. So up to you guys. But so for our answer key, yeah. So the first part for 1A, we just wanted to pass in those props into our function. So these are kind of like parameters for our component. And so it's The reason we put it in between curly braces is because we want it to be an object. So we're just passing all of these values as one object. And so that was the first one. And then for the second, third, and fourth, those were a little bit easier. For the first one, all you have to do was fill in this title right here. We already had H2, like our header 2. We want our, since it's a title, we want it to be a header, not just like plain text paragraph. And then we just slap in our variable title here so that we can do that. And then for 1C, pretty straightforward. Just since this is going to be a paragraph or description of the this is going to be a description of the votes. So just like this. Any questions? Sweet. And if you guys didn't get that, that's chill. Like as I said, for the next workshop, if you guys feel like you guys destroyed your code, or if you feel like you're like experimenting and doing something cool, next workshop we're just gonna switch to another branch. So it's gonna be a snapshot. So like if you ever want to come back to like this workshop and see like what code you did, you can just get switched back to this branch. But for next time, we'll just switch to another branch. So you guys don't worry. But let's move on to our second activity. If you guys still need help for this one, we can come around and help you guys out. But we're just gonna get moving on to the second one. For this one, we're just gonna we're gonna start working on the create whole page. So we're actually gonna add in these input fields so that we can start working and creating some actual, so we can like have some interactivity with the website. For the first part, you guys can just navigate through here in VS Code. You don't have to change the directory. And there's just going to be another set of comments. We're just going to be creating hooks for this one. So if you guys remember, hooks is what we're going to use to change the state of our components. So just the activity before, we added our components as props, and now we're going to be able to change those. So yeah, yes, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time to do that. Feel free to chat. What is it called? The callback.
Just because we pass in we're going to use that counter with known variables. So the callback function. So let's try and get this.
And wait, in the
Yeah, sort of like this.
gotcha. Okay. Oh, we should have done these before introduced it.
I can still get slide right now. Bro, that's introduce an actual one. I can still that something.
Just have to review. Yeah, can you throw that in? Did we go over our functions? And I'll just tell us.
I remember. Yeah, but you don't have any right? You just have to.
Let me see.
Also, I don't think it's
Because then, wait, Tyler.
so. On the next side.
Yeah, I'll just move to it.
You might need to exit out and go back.
All right.
Or if you need to pass parameters. This one.
Because like, let's see, because like this is, because look.
Or the issue is that like they need to get. I don't think they can because they need the e parameter here to access target value.
Mhm.
So I think they do need arrow functions.
Okay. Not too bad. Do you want to present arrow functions? Because I feel like you have a lot more knowledge on arrow functions than me. Yeah, sorry.
So just as a quick aside, if you guys are confused on how basically we're going to be updating the hook, the difference between last activity's hook and this activity's hook is that instead of using a callback function, we need to use an arrow function. So as you can see here, on the top is the regular function that we normally use in a callback, where you declare it as function, function name, and then in the parentheses is the parameters. But an arrow function is defined within a variable. So for example, you could use let addnums or const addnums equals, and then in those first set of parentheses there is going to be the parameters, and then you're going to do equals greater than sign because it looks like an arrow, and then the output is going to be the next code after that. So the purpose of arrow functions is that this way you can store the function in a variable itself, and if you need to use a hook that takes an argument, then that's primarily what arrow functions are used for within React as well.
So yeah, for this activity, you guys can, for part 2, we're going to use the arrow functions. So I'm just going to show the hint right now. So it kind of makes a little bit more sense of like how they're used. Part 1, that was just like setting our hooks. That was just like kind of copying the code that we showed before. Very simple, like we still have our value and our set, like our setter function. But for this one, you guys can learn a little bit how we're doing the arrow function, which is we're just calling our set example, and then we're gonna. This is just the way we can just make it one line instead of callback function. You guys need more time on this? Couple minutes.
Like basically, it's short for event. So anytime on change, so there's then you want to get the event started stuff. So basically, what did you change? So yeah, we probably I probably should.
What's up?
So I mean, I guess the invention solution says that right. Yeah. So once once the line level looks up, every time you save it, it should refresh this page. And I'll get through. Doesn't work.
I usually see one of these. Please not fine. Wait.
Um, that's yeah, they should lower. Yeah. Did you start on this? I just wanted to get this. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to explain this to me? Like the unchanged entire part. This is this. Okay. Try typing this next. Um. So basically, and inside everything. So you're basically creating Should I just go over it? Okay. So, if you guys are confused about the on-change line here, basically within a input field in HTML, anytime the text inside the field changes, it'll fire what's called an event. So on-change is the event here, and then inside the brackets or inside the curly braces basically is what you do whenever there's a change to the text field. So in this instance, the E there is going to be the event. So when we do e.target.value, we're getting what we changed the text inside the field to. So for example, if I type like test inside our newly created input field, e.target.value would be equal to test. And that's why after we get the value from e.target.value, we use it for set example because we want to store the value inside our text field inside the example variable, if that makes sense. So moving on to our answer key. This is going to be all of the hooks and all of the HTML code that you'll need. And then also on the next slide is the continuation of the answer key. So make sure you check that out. And we're going to be moving on shortly. Make sure you raise your hands if you have any questions. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna move on. Yes. All right. I think we're gonna move on. That way we can get all of us can get out of here a little faster. So we're just gonna because we still have one more part. From here, we're gonna talk about Next.js, and then we have one more activity with Next. So that's why we're gonna try to go a little bit. We're gonna go get through it so we can dip early. But so there's two things before I talk about Next.js. There's two things that I want to talk about, which is server-side rendering and client-side rendering. Server side is a little bit of some older technology, but the biggest difference between both of them is that for server side, we have a fast initial load time, but it's not going to be very interactive. It's going to be a little slower on interactivity. On the other side, client side, it's going to take a little bit more time to load up, but once everything's loaded up, it's going to be a little bit more interactive. The reason is when you're using server side rendering, every time you want to interact with the website, it's gonna ask the server, and the server is gonna respond, and then it's gonna execute. So this communication between your machine and the server takes a little bit of time. So in terms of interacting, takes a little longer. But since we don't have any logic on our machine, booting it up is very quick. On the other side, when we do client-side rendering, it's kind of the opposite, where as we're loading up, we're downloading all of the logic, all of this JS logic onto our machine. So once it's loaded up, it's going to be very fast because we don't have to communicate with the server as much for just very basic like interactivity, but it's going to take a little bit longer to load up because we have to download all of this stuff. And so that's why Next.js is kind of this magical solution that's going to bridge the gap between both of them. What it does is we take server side, we take this very fast, this HTML, the structure of our website is going to load up very fast. From there, we're going to have a process called hydration, which is as the user, the user, they just see their website show up, and then this hydration process is where all of this logic shows up to them. So that's why it's like sometimes when you're opening up a website, for a little bit of time, you can't actually click on all the buttons. It still shows, but you can't click on anything. This is why it's this hydration process where all of the logic is being downloaded, and then once it's up and running, then we can use client side rendering. And so this is like the good thing about Next is it's gonna be this optimization between client side and server side. So we're gonna be able to choose what's best for depending on like what we want. For routing, Next uses the file directory for routing. So for example, oh, I can't actually see this well, but I'll show you guys here. This right here. Um, your URL link in Next is going to be what directory, like what folder you're in. So for example, if we look down here, we have our website, website.com. We're under the dashboard folder, and inside the dashboard, we're under the settings folder, and then we have our page, so page.js. And so whatever you see on your URL link, that's what's going to be like, that's going to be your folder structure. And the good thing is that each file inside your app is going to return a page. So the React component that's going to return is going to be a different page. And we have dynamic routing, which is just the better way of saying we can't hard code anything. And so we can include as parameter, we can include we can include parameters in the URL itself. So it's going to look at the URL, what file, and that's going to be used to like define what is shown on the page. So this slug is our custom identifier for a dynamic route. And the reason is, for example, you have millions of YouTube channels, each with their own page. We can't hard code all that. So the YouTube URL is that's technically a parameter that whenever you open that page, it's going to display different things based on that parameter. So that's just a way so that us as the programmer don't have to make every single page, especially if the user wants their own page. Yeah, and the way we can define this is we make a custom folder that has brackets and and so for here we're calling it ID, and the pages inside the page that's inside this folder is going to render with whatever this custom parameter is. Um, yeah, and then a little bit more syntax, we can define params as an argument in our function. And whenever we call params dot whatever it is, so in this case it was params dot ID, then we can actually show up custom stuff. In the real world, you're not really going to show up like, well, you can show up like this is the URL, but you can already see the URL. Usually what it's used for is you take the URL and then you send that URL to the server and then it's going to output some stuff back. So that way you can do a little bit more stuff than just displaying the URL on your page. You're going to actually be able to make server calls, which we'll go over on like a little bit later. Let's move on to our activity 3. So just as I was saying, we don't want to have each poll be its own page because it'd be just a pain so that every time a user wants to create a new poll, we don't want to go in our folders, create a new file, do all that. So instead, we're just going to use dynamic routing. Yeah, we're going to go in polls and then we're going to make this folder slug. And when the page is viewed, right now, we simply, all we want to do is just display whatever, display our slug on the page. So we'll come around and help you guys out. We're ahead of time, so we'll go through this kind of quick and then we can get out. That was in your lesson. Oh.
This one is one of those years.
Hmm?
That's one of those.
Oh yeah. Oh, 2 years, yeah, probably. Is he one of your TAs?
I was asking you.
Hmm?
I was asking you.
Oh yeah.
Man, I'm hungry.
Hmm?
I'm hungry.
Dude, I'm hungry. Still, I can just show it. They don't show it that much.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, I think I can just show it. Yeah, I'm gonna show the hints right now because they give a little bit more guidance without giving away the answer. So you guys can just refer to that. A little bit more detailed instructions. And wait, Tyler, go. They want to test it. Can they just go like,
Yeah.
just change the show up?
I can make an announcement. That
Uh, I can do it.
is any question. Yeah, what's up?
All of the stuff, right?
Starters for workshop two, but
Okay.
it will have all of that. Or actually, I think workshop two also has like the full slug thing as well.
Okay, so that's in branch the workshop too. So they can like turn
If they're done, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah, it will be. The I don't think that's possible. That's it. Um, I think when we finish up the activity.
You do it.
Oh yeah, like this is the slug page is complete, but the answer key should be. This is like the actually like the latest slug page because we don't touch it for the rest of the TypeScript. So.
What's the battery life that I got? Dog.
Wait, you're gonna.
Now we're chilling. I might die.
You might.
I die.
You have a charger?
Nope. That's chill.
Okay.
That's super chill, bro.
So brightness.
Yeah, I turned the brightness all the way down. Nice job. Oh, for the zoom. That'd be a fail.
Oh, the recording might cut to.
Yeah. Are we recording?
Yeah, we're recording.
Do I need to do anything with that after?
You need to hit more and then stop recording, I believe.
Right now?
Whenever we're done. Or like whenever you're about to run out of battery, I guess.
I'm about to run out of battery.
Uh,
That's all.
let's say when you hit 4%.
It might die. It's probably gonna die. That's chill.
Actually, maybe we should do it right now so that if it's saving, it doesn't get cut off.
Okay, I'm recording.
Just stop the recording right now. Yeah.
Pause. Stop recording.